to do with it. In this talk, Paul will discuss the use of silicone in modern technology. He'll explain it in simple terms why this element is the foundation of nearly all of our electronics. Paul's background on this topic comes from his education and career as a circuit design engineer in the semiconductor industry. For those of you who attended Paul's last speech, he promises that this introduction is not a misdirection. And by the way, he's going to talk about some heavy duty stuff.
All right, I'm super excited about today's topic because it is about what I do for work. And I'm a little bit biased here, but I think it's all super interesting stuff. Real quick, I want to ask you guys, when you hear Silicon Valley, how many of you think of, let's say, maybe computer programmers and tech startups? Would you say that's pretty common? And then how many of you is the first thing that comes to mind, integrated circuits? Good, just what I thought. In today's world, all of our electronic technology, whether it's your computer, your phone, cars, TV, you name it, it all is based off of having electronic circuits. And you probably have some idea in your head of what an electronic circuit is. Maybe something like this, a little printed circuit board, and we have things, there's an inductor, there's a capacitor, a little resistor there, metal traces connecting, everything else, and so on. This is great, and it serves a specific purpose. However, a lot of times we need circuits that are much smaller. And I mean much, much, much smaller. And that is where an integrated circuit comes into play. And an integrated circuit is basically the same idea, however, just on a microscopic scale. So what I want to show you here is, this is the last project that I had worked on at work. I'm doing a little show and tell today. And this is an example of the layout of a microchip, of an integrated circuit. And you see all of it, you won't be able to tell exactly what it is, but you'll see a lot of the same things. There are all these tiny little metal traces connecting everything up. And there'll be a bunch of different components in here as well, very similar to the PCB, just very, very small. And you probably can't see it from here, but I have taped on here, this microchip is right up there. And so I'm going to pass this around, and you guys can see for yourselves just what sort of scale we're talking about when I say very, very small circuits. Now, all of our integrated circuits these days, or pretty much all of them, are made out of silicon. And so what I want to do is I want to explain to you guys just why silicon is so important and why we use it to make these tiny little circuits. Of all of these different components I was talking about, resistors, capacitors, and so on, there's one function that reigns supreme and is more important than any of the rest of them. And that's the ability to, if you have two terminals that has electricity moving between them, the ability to control that flow of electricity through a third terminal. So the way to think about that is like a light switch. So the light switch, there is energy in the grid that wants to get to the light bulb. And we have the ability to, with the light switch, say that that electricity can flow or not flow. Or to take that one step further, you could also imagine like a dimmer switch, with a little more fine-tuned ability to control the flow of electricity. For many years, that function was performed by vacuum tubes. So if you ever saw like an old tube amplifier with a big glass thing on it, that was a vacuum tube, and that was performing that same function electrically. Because in a circuit, you can't have a person running around and turning knobs. You need to be done electrically. Vacuum tubes are cool, but they suck. They are really big, they're really fragile, and you can't make them really small. So what we need is something else that can perform the same function. What we want is some element that can either conduct electricity or not conduct electricity. So my next demonstration here is we have a periodic table of the elements, and I've highlighted this table in a specific way. So everything that you see here in blue is a metal or a conductor, something that can conduct electricity. Everything in yellow is a non-metal or an insulator, something that cannot conduct electricity. And then right in the middle here, these green dudes are some very important elements. Those are semiconductors. They can either conduct electricity or not conduct electricity. I'm gonna oversimplify greatly here. Really, this whole thing is an oversimplification, but what we can do is we can make a silicon transistor by taking silicon and putting in a few other elements. It's gonna be maybe a little boron, maybe a little phosphorus, mix them together, do some chemistry, and we can make a silicon transistor. And that transistor serves the purpose of what a vacuum tube used to do and what the light switch does, just on a much smaller scale. And so what is so nice about this is, so now we have the ability to control the flow of electricity, like I was talking about. And what has allowed this explosive growth in technology over the last 60 years is we've been able to take this silicon transistor and make it smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, to the point where we can make circuits like the one that I showed you. And in fact, today, our circuits now will have literally billions of transistors on a single integrated circuit, which is hard to fathom just what a billion is, but it's a lot. And that stuff is really, 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 really small, and we're able to make them regardless. In addition to that, they're also cheap, which is nice, because even though there's a lot of research and development that goes into making these chips, by the time we can manufacture them, they're actually pretty cheap. And the one I showed you today, we sell that for about tens of cents, believe it or not. And so, what I want you guys to do is next time somebody mentions Silicon Valley to you, instead of thinking about programmers and startups, I want you to think about, oh, silicon. That's that really cool element that allows us to make transistors and integrated circuits that allow all of our